everyone, and welcome to Word on the Street Election Edition. Well, as you all probably know, Word on the Street, the traditional edition, is normally where we focus on people and culture matters that are happening in the workplace, with the workforce, and I give you my perspective on what's going on today, tomorrow, yesterday, in the workplace. Well, for Election Edition, I bring in current elected officials and elected official hopefuls to hear about their vision for the future of their office, what they're planning to accomplish, what their hopes and dreams are, how they're going to transform the world. And we talk about it here on Word on the Street Election Edition. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Word on the Street Election Edition. Joining us here today is Keith Wilson. Welcome, Keith.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Cirilla.
coming and
So
joining
nice
us
to see
today.
you. Thanks for this honor.
I'm so happy you're here.
Yeah, as well.
So, Keith, I'm excited you're here because as I was sharing with you as we were getting mic'd up, I feel like you came from out of nowhere. I mean, not in the political arenas that I'm familiar with, local politics. I hadn't heard about you. You're a businessman. Mm-hmm. And then, you said you were running for mayor, and I'm like, okay, early in the process. And then all of a sudden, you were like charging, like hard charging, going forward. People are like paying attention. It's giving Obama when he spoke at the DNC, and people were like, who's that young guy from Illinois?
Oh,
and then all of a sudden, he's like president of the United States of America. So I'm interested in who are you? Tell the people who you are. What's your background?
Wow, that framing with Obama, that's incredible, great caricature, but character. But he was hope and change and a different direction from where we're at right now. So I appreciate you saying that. So where did I come? Let's start where I'm at right now and let's talk about the politics. And then let me go back to where I began.
Yeah.
So I didn't come out of nowhere. For the last 6 years, I've been working with our legislators, senators and representatives, and city leaders and councilors and commissioners. And if you ask them, they all know who I am because I've been in the trenches helping them succeed. Jessica Vega Peterson had the universal pre-K.
Yeah.
I was helping her behind the scenes on that, writing op-eds. If you go to the newspaper, you'll see my opinions because childcare was one of my early formative benefits that I had coming from a poor family. So I'm all in with helping her. Well, I've been helping her for years, and Lynn Peterson with President Peterson for Oregon Metro, high-speed rail. We've been in the trenches for years working on these very substantive projects. And the council, and as far as the legislature, I've been writing bills and passing bills for the last several years. It's locally, when we look at the grassroots, that you're right, I'm not known, but I'm one of those workhorses, not a show horse. And when you think about it, we need those. But then I didn't see my city really developing and changing, and I'm starting running into high school classmates in tents. And a lot of them are dying. And so I jumped in and really started learning over this last 4 or 5 years, what are the biggest issues keeping Portland from flourishing, from not only surviving, but thriving? And so going back to the beginning now. So I grew up in North Portland. I was one of 7 family members in a 900 square foot home, super tiny, right next to the Columbia Villa, New Columbia, a block away from the state's largest housing project. So mom was an Avon lady. Dad delivered luggage from the airport when it got lost. Entrepreneurs, they worked 7 days as hard as humanly possible. We had a wonderful upbringing, but it was poor. But education wasn't centered in our family. My father, nor my brothers, my 2 brothers, graduated from high school. So I mean, you can see we did not value education, but I did. I graduated from Roosevelt, and then I had this North Star to get a college degree, and I put myself through college 5 years. Took a long time, had to work the whole time. Got a master's degree, and then I picked up stakes, and I moved to New York City, and my first job was with NBC. At 30 Rock. Had a wonderful time.
And you were on the 30 Rock show?
I wasn't on 30 Rock show. I was in 30 Rock, the building.
Oh,
so I was on the 47th floor, working with the studios, working with talent, selling primetime sales. And then NBC was supplying 25% of content to a brand new station in New Zealand. And so I called them up and said, do you need some help? And they said, yes. So I took a year off and traveled around the world, lived and worked in London, through Europe, and then got there and started interviewing, and I realized, wow, this is a beautiful city. It's a city in the forest, Auckland, New Zealand. But I had already been to like 30, 40 of the world's most beautiful cities. And then I realized after being gone from Oregon for many years, None of them compared to Portland. So I came back. Dad had that small package delivery company then. I joined it. You know, I was television. Do I want to go into small package? And I joined my father's business, and then I just started growing it. I didn't want to be a caretaker. I wanted to be an innovator. And now today, you know, I've merged businesses, grown businesses. We're throughout Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and arguably we're the most advanced carrier in the nation. So we have the lowest workforce injury rate in the state. We talk about systems and safety and caring for your people. And then I use artificial intelligence, you know, extraordinary technology to help my drivers with safe driving practice. We have one of the lowest crash rates in the nation. We don't use a single gallon of fossil fuels in my Portland fleet. Almost zero in Oregon altogether. Lowest carbon footprint carrier in the nation. And then last August, Senator Merkley, Brett Bonamici, President Peterson all came to my office, and we took delivery of a fleet of heavy-duty electric trucks, the first in the Northwest.
Wow.
So we've received National Innovator of the Year for the last 2 years, as arguably the most advanced carrier in the nation. But despite all that and that success, I look around at my city and it's on fire, Cyrilda. When I have and see my neighbors living in tents downtown, and Elizabeth is my neighbor across the street, addicted to fentanyl, living in a tent downtown, and you know the city gave her the tent. The county gave her the tent. The city then comes and sweeps the tent.
Right.
And the outreach worker is there a couple hours later to hand out another tent. So we're fostering this behavior rather than caring for Elizabeth. Now Anne, her mother, and forgive me, limit names, we know to help her, we actually have to pull the tents away. We actually have to not provide the tents, but provide basic nighttime shelter. When she's ready to recover, she needs to hit rock bottom. It's a natural progression in addiction. You can't give somebody a tent and let the dealer be in the next tent.
Right.
Because you're allowing that behavior to just foster itself. So that brings me to today. I've talked to our leaders, I've talked to commissioners, talked to everybody. I've been presenting on ending unsheltered homelessness for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Meeting figures from around our nation and around the world on best practices and bringing them back to here. And I can't get people to listen to show that Portland is an outlier. Most cities in the world do not have their citizens suffering on the street in tents or in RVs or makeshift shelters.
Right.
Only Portland. Yes, there's a few other cities on the West Coast, but that brings us to you and me in this conversation and why I'm running for mayor. We're going to reverse that neglect in our city.
Well, you've been really outspoken about your plan to end homelessness. Your most ambitious plan is to end homelessness within 12 months by using community spaces like churches as overnight sheltering sites with enough beds. Tell me why you believe that this is possible to accomplish this in 12 months under your leadership.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's happening in almost all cities in the United States, except for Portland. So I can tell you the genesis of that is I befriended Dave Beater, the mayor of Boise, because in Boise they did the same strategy that I'm going to employ here in Portland. In Boise, they lost this case called Martin versus Boise in 2018, and it stated that camping is legalized. You cannot enforce your no camping laws unless you have enough shelter for the entire population. So as soon as Dave lost that case, he was the appellate, he had 120 tents right outside of City Hall. He brought his fire, his police, his homeless service providers into his conference room and said, look out that window. What are we doing, ladies and gentlemen?
Right.
And they said, Mr. Mayor, we lost that case. We have to let him do that. Hence what we hear that in Portland all the time.
For sure.
So that's an excuse. So he said, absolutely not. We're a caring community. We're not a camping community. He said, you have 30 days. I need you to do a surge. You take all your shelters, you create however many mats or shelter beds or open facilities. I don't care what it takes. In 30 days, we're ending unsheltered homelessness in Boise because we're going to have all the shelters or shelter beds we need plus one. And they did it. But in that period of time, he did what's called a by name list. All of his outreach workers were counting and getting the names, what are your needs? And so at day zero, he knew the entire population and who it was and what their needs were. So they ended unsheltered homelessness on that one day. And he said, here's what happened, Keith. He said, of the 120 people just outside of City Hall, he said 40 went back home regionally. Cheyenne, Missoula, Portland. He says, because we allowed the tent encampment, we drew regionally. He said, then a third went back home locally. They went back to couch surfing. They had interaction issues with their families because relationships are hard.
Yeah.
We all know that.
They are.
But when you allow the encampment to draw and friends are there and there's perhaps addiction or behavioral health, it was that magnet for people to be in the tent. He said, here's what happened. At the end of the day, of all the beds I set up or the mats or whatever it was, he said only a third were taken. He says, that's what will happen in Portland. So now I'll draw that with numbers I know in Portland. In Portland, 35% of everybody that's homeless are what's called homeless upon arrival. They were homeless in a different jurisdiction other than Multnomah County, and they became and were
They
homeless
migrated.
here. Yes. So that matched up with his numbers exactly.
Yeah.
And so I thought, wow, okay. So, and then he said this quote to me, and I have it on my Shelter Portland website. He said, Keith, I was frightened and my team was too. We thought by setting up all these beds that we were going to draw people into the shelters. He said, no, it's the opposite. It's not enforcing your camping codes and your community standards that drew people to camping. And he said he was completely surprised. And so I tell you, we can do this in 12 months.
Right.
But also, I want to go back to the 1990s. Bud Clark had endemic homelessness in Old Town. Mike Lindbergh's on my team. Commissioner Mike Lindbergh's on my team. Dan Steffi's on my team. They ended unsheltered homelessness in 12 months, doing the same strategy that I'm employing and I'm promoting to the city. They did this already. We were a national leader in this program that many communities throughout the nation actually developed and are still using today, except Portland.
So what about those who don't want to go into a shelter? What,
Yeah.
what about people who are housing resistant, their preference is to be able to camp in the city?
Yeah.
What happens then?
Well, the operative word is you can't camp in the city. So let's fast forward to say June 1st of next year. That's my target date. Whether I'm able to do it earlier
June
or
1,
later.
2025.
Yes.
Okay.
So we have to have 2,400 shelter beds set up because that's the population that we know we need to shelter in adult shelters. Families, we know where there's over 5,000 people on the street, but you can't put families in shelters.
Yeah.
County's going to put them in hotels. Unaccompanied minors cannot go in shelters.
Right.
They go into hotels. They're cared a different way. We know we need 2,400 beds to meet the spirit of Martin versus Boise, the law. So we set up 2,400 beds. So you said, what was your question?
What about those who are housing resistant?
So we now
They don't wanna go
thank
inside.
you. So we set up those 2,400 beds. Now we're able to enforce our no camping codes, no makeshift shelters, no RVs, and there's no more 72-hour rule, right? Because right now we have to have a 72-hour posting minimum.
Oh yeah,
before we
you
clear
put the
it.
thing on the
Yep.
on the thing, and then someone comes and talks
Yeah.
to them and says, "Hey, in 3 days we're going to do a sweep.
Yeah.
In 2 days we're going to do a sweep.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we're going to do a sweep." Okay.
Yeah, so there's no more postings.
Okay.
Because we have enough beds.
Okay.
So a Portland Street response would come up and say, Cirilda, I'm taking your tent away, or you can't have your tent here, I'm not taking it away. We'll give them notice, but you can't camp anymore, and you can't set it up anywhere else in Portland.
That's right.
And your RV, which is 2012 registered, or uninsured, or inoperable, that's DMV code now. We can enforce our DMV codes, because absent the shelter beds, that RV is considered a primary resident.
Oh, okay.
We now get to enforce our DMV codes. And we say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. RV owner, we're gonna give you 30 days. We need you to get that registered, need you to get it insured. We recognize that that's your home. But absent those requirements, registration, insurance, and licensing, that has to be impounded or towed.
Yeah.
Because that's the DMV law that is throughout our nation. So this is not draconian to me, it's just basic blocking and tackling. But here's the thing though, Cirilda, we will have an option for somebody with basic nighttime shelter and services through day shelters to care for them. What's their need? What's going on, right? No more arresting, no more citations. We're not gonna fine people because we have to admit we're not gonna get money from a homeless person.
Right.
We're not gonna put them in jail because we have to admit that's the second highest cost of housing.
Right.
Second only to hospitals. We don't have that time. Our officers don't have time to do that, you know, so.
Okay. So what do you think is getting in the way of Portland actually solving the homelessness crisis that we've had for several years now? What's getting in the way?
Exceptionalism. In the 90s, we thought we were the cream of the crop. We had people from around the world coming to visit Portland. We were exceptional. We had an extraordinary transportation system, tied in with water, the innovation, Nike, Intel. We were hitting on all cylinders.
True.
And then we started drinking the Kool-Aid and we started thinking, we stopped innovating. We stopped caring. And so we started not looking outside for best practices. And so we started developing our own programs here. In 2017, when we started our Joint Office of Homeless Services, the first thing we did, we closed all of our nighttime emergency shelters.
Wait, say that again.
In 2017, the Joint Office of Homeless Services
Was created.
We used to have a host of nighttime emergency shelters. And we had 1,700 unsheltered people living on the street. If you look at our graph, it looks like a hockey stick. 2017 and 5 years previous, it was 1,400 people unsheltered, 1,700, 1,600. At 2017, we changed our rules. We closed all of our nighttime shelters. We defunded them. And if they wouldn't go to 24 hours, wouldn't convert from nighttime to 24 hours, we closed them.
Wow.
We have shelters downtown right now that are empty tonight and have been for 5 years. The Salvation Army Female Emergency Shelter at 2nd and Ankeny, 126 beds that are empty tonight and have been for 5 years. It was a female emergency domestic violence shelter that the police would take domestic violence victims to, closed, because they wouldn't move to 24 hours.
Wow.
So when you think about, that's a political decision we made. And here's the other thing. We did that in the face of signing a declaration of a homeless emergency. It boggles my mind, the lack of focus. Do we have an emergency or not?
Right.
If we have an
If we
emergency,
do,
then we pull out
every
the
bed that we
stops.
have.
Yeah, picture an earthquake. If we had an earthquake in Portland right now, I guarantee you if we had 50,000 people unsheltered, they'd be sheltered in a week.
Yes.
We have 5,000 neighbors on the street that are not faceless and nameless, and they're affecting the livability for everybody.
Yep.
You know, our families and our residents are fleeing. Businesses.
Yes.
Trimble downtown 4 months ago, they're out. 277 jobs lost. Hoffman last year, they said we're out.
Yeah.
Livability, crime, and an inability to manage and block and tackle our community.
Lost Nike on MLK.
We lost
due to theft. We just lost Dick's Sporting. We went to go get school supplies,
Where?
and they're the
Cascade
one.
Station?
Yeah, the one that was right by Walmart.
Oh
so
my
we lost the
goodness.
Walmart,
Oh.
and then we lost the Dick's Sporting.
Well, REI,
Yeah.
Starbucks. We
Left
can't even
downtown.
keep a McDonald's downtown.
Yeah.
So there are costs
There
to
are
political
consequences.
decisions. Yeah, and that's the cost. But the good thing is we can reverse that. All we have to do is provide basic nighttime care for our most vulnerable, and we provide care to our entire community.
Yeah.
But and if we talk about crime, I mean, crime is horrible. Our arrest rate for property crime right now, let's think about Dick's. Our arrest rate for property crime is 5%.
Yeah.
So it is open season if
Open
you
season.
are a thief, because you know, even if you have a modicum of intelligence, which of course, let's be clear, if you're stealing, you're struggling.
Yeah.
But it is a vast majority that you're not going to be held accountable.
Right. I said this in an interview about maybe 8 months ago with a candidate. It was actually with the Schmidt and Vasquez. I said, I was in Dick's Sporting Goods getting some cleats for my daughter who plays soccer. And a guy walked in and walked out with a kayak over his head. Maybe it was a canoe. It was huge. And I remember sitting there paying for some socks and some cleats. And I said, hey, that guy's got a kayak. And he's walking out. And they're like, yeah, we follow him out. We take down his plates. And then we alert the police afterwards. I'm like, well, can I put my cleats and my socks in the kayak and just go collect them on the... Why am I paying for the cleats and the kayak and the socks when this guy's walking out with a whole kayak in my face?
Gosh, my response to Rilda, here's what I would do. I would intercede, because I've decided no longer to allow that policy to continue on. And so here's the way I operate my business, and here's how I'll operate as mayor. If I walk by that, I've created a new policy that it's acceptable. And so the same way my business, if there's garbage on the ground, if a policy is not being followed, as a senior manager, if I don't do something, I've created a policy.
Right.
And so I teach my team, my children, and as the mayor goes, if somebody's incapacitated on the side of the street, that's against the law. All right? They're suffering from addiction or behavioral health. The officers are supposed to stop, and they have 4 things they must do.
Right.
And they're not doing them because they're overwhelmed.
Yep.
So let's talk about why they're
Or they're not supported. They
Yeah.
feel like if
or,
I
or not
actually
supported, right.
do
But-
the job,
so-
I get in trouble.
Yeah, so let's talk about why I need unsheltered homelessness. Everything else I have hinges on that one critical thing. We cannot have 5,000, and here's the reason why. So I rode with the neighborhood response teams, the police officers downtown. We arrested a guy, and they checked his record. He had been arrested 9 times in 3 months.
Wow.
All right, he's suffering from heroin. He's addiction. He's living in a camper, and we allow the camper to be there because we don't have shelter. So now let's talk about the arrest. So 10 years ago, an officer in your priority one call, worst time of need. You are in peril. You had an accident or somebody's harming you, Cyrilda. They'd be there in 6 minutes, guaranteed. Today it's 24 minutes.
Right.
They're overwhelmed. But here's the root cause and the why. 50% of all arrests in Portland, over 50%, are of the unsheltered.
50%.
Remember, there's only 5,000 of them. Oof. There's 650,000 Portland residents, over 50%. But here's the thing. If you provide basic nighttime shelter, those that are living in shelter only represent 2%.
Right.
Now, they're only 1% of our population. That's okay. 2% of the arrest rate are addressing 1% of the population. That's okay. That's immaterial, right?
Right.
But when you have just 5,000 people unsheltered consuming 50% of all of the arrest time of our officers, you can see why they are carrying kayaks out of dicks.
Right.
You can see why the response time is 24 minutes instead of 6. So here's that basic 1 + 1 = 2. End unsheltered homelessness. Just provide basic nighttime emergency shelter. And the arrest rate goes from 52% to 2% for those living in shelter. And now let's talk about the cost. So my sheltering cost, and if anybody goes to Shelter Portland, my nonprofit, go to the budget. And it has clearly delineated what the cost is going to be, because I don't want people to think that this is going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. It's $25 million. That's it. We're spending, just in the city budget, $300 million today because of boulders we're putting on the side of the roads.
Right.
$26 million in sweeps. $35 million in police and firefighter overtime. $67 million is going to Portland Solutions, a brand new department, to take customer complaints from citizens because of encampments. Remove all that. Reduce that system cost. Care for your community.
Keith, now if we fact checked you, these numbers are real numbers, because these numbers sound
They all have citations.
sobering.
Absolutely. And I don't make things up. If you go to my website, Shelter Portland, you'll see the citation from the mayor 5 months ago. He said, I'm on my city budget, it's $300 million I have to the aggregated cost of unsheltered homelessness.
Wow.
And so go to these and find them yourself. It's sobering, but the good thing is it can be reversed quickly. This is not rocket science. I'm not a bright guy, but I follow numbers well. And I have a dogged approach. When you have neighbors that are dying, stop overthinking this and get to work, and stop looking at the worst of the worst for examples. You know, our city council goes down to LA. And I'm thinking, why are you going to LA? They are the worst performing city in the world when it comes to unsheltered. And I see us doing junkets down there. Stop. I call that a wow. It's called the worst of the worst. You go to the Bobs, the best of the best. You go to Boise, you go to New Orleans, you go to Rockford, Illinois, Bergen, and those are all the cities that I've developed relationships with their mayors and their commissioners who are helping me. And they're coming here on October 10th, and we're putting on a great big forum at a high school, inviting the entire community in to come and meet President Obama's Assistant Secretary to Reduce Homelessness. And he's going to talk to you about what we've done, and we can do this.
So tell me about, there are two things that you mentioned that I want to double click on. Number one is Shelter Portland. I want to hear all about it. What is it? How does it work? But then number two are your travels across the nation and the world. Trying to better understand the mechanics of homelessness and the mechanics of the solutions for homelessness, where people are doing it well. And so, which one do you want to take first? You want to tell me about your national travels?
It's a great question. They actually are tied together. Because Shelter Portland was created because of all the knowledge. Shelter Portland is that repository for all of those stories and knowledge. If you go to Shelter Portland, you're going to see, forgive me to the user, but you're going to see an awful lot of photos. You're going to see stories and anecdotes, because I want people to know that we're an outlier in Portland. So you're going to see all the stories and the individuals that I've brought together as this team. So let's start with the examples. So about 4 or 5 years ago, I participated in a group called Shelter Now. And we're an advocacy group, business leaders, elected officials, community leaders, unhoused people, because we knew something was awry, and we all dug in and started learning what do we need to do. And then we created Shelter Portland. Now that's our operational nonprofit. We started setting up shelters based on what we knew and the examples that we were testing. So now Shelter Portland's right there. But Shelter Portland, if you look at our leadership council, it has 10 national leaders on it. And those leaders have developed unsheltering strategies in their communities, and they've ended unsheltered homelessness. The Boise mayor is on my team.
Right.
And so he ended unsheltered homelessness. Bergen County, New Jersey. It's the first county right across the river from New York City that ended unsheltered homelessness and ended homelessness using Built for Zero. Rockford, Illinois ended unsheltered homelessness using Built for Zero. New Orleans, Mayor Landrieu, who I've met with twice in New Orleans. He's now President Biden's White House advisor today. I met with him just in May and then last May as well. He suffered the consequences of Hurricane Katrina. He was the lieutenant governor in 2005. And he said, Keith, I had 250,000 people unsheltered in one night. And they said they're going to abandon New Orleans. And in 2010, he ran to became mayor of New Orleans. We all remember these conversations about abandoning New Orleans.
Oh, yeah.
Right? The dikes. Think about Portland. Portland's on fire, and people are abandoning Portland. So he said, not on my watch. He was born and bred in New Orleans. And when he took over as mayor, he had 8,000 people unsheltered. We have 5,000. So I want to give people a reference. We need to stop thinking it's so big. Just find a bigger example or reference and do it. So I was talking to the mayor in May. He says, here's what happened, Keith. I had 8,000 people living on the street. And he brought in all of his homeless service providers. And he had support from the Obamas as well. And he said, okay, everybody, we're going to end unsheltered homelessness. And we're going to do it in a year. And they all balked at him. Sir, we can't do it. It's too hard. I can't do it. And he said, enough. I'll do your blocking and tackling. I'm with you on this. I'll give you anything you need now. Go do it. And they came back to him with a plan. And they said, Mr. Mayor, we can do it in a year. And he said, great. Now you're going to do it in 6 months. Go. And they did it. And they went from 8,000 people unsheltered. In 2 years, they're down to 1,000. And today, they have 364. So my point is we need to stop thinking our problems are so insurmountable. Find an example of somebody who successfully ended unsheltered homelessness and then copy it.
What's the one thing that when you go into all these places who are doing homelessness response well, what's the one thing they all have in common?
Nighttime emergency shelters. That flex up and flex down. My nighttime emergency shelters are $19 a night. A Safe Rest Village in Portland, our solution, a temporary alternative shelter, $189 a night.
Dan Ryan was the catalyst behind the Safe Rest Villages. Yeah.
And I get it. We tried something. We had a lot of ARPA money. But the shelters I have are a tenth the cost of what the city's doing it. We set them up at 9 p.m. We close it at 7 a.m. I augment it with day shelters. But let's be clear. If you are unsheltered, do you know in a normal functioning society, 53% of the people are going to work the next day. They're your baristas.
Yeah.
They are just people that are down in their luck. Now, that's not Portland because we have so many people that arrived from outside of the jurisdiction. We're not Boise. In Boston, they have 119 people unsheltered tonight. 119. We have 5,300. In Philadelphia, they have 788 people unsheltered tonight in a city twice the size we are.
I'm like, Philadelphia, is it only twice the size of Portland? Are there only under 2 million people
in Philadelphia County.
Oh, okay.
But here's the thing, though, Cyrilda. Do you know what they have that we don't? Nighttime emergency shelters to flex up and flex down.
Okay.
So I started opening shelters in churches. And the churches love it because if you provide a church, a sanctuary, and I have a fire marshal occupancy of 100 souls, I give you $80 per month per person. That's the occupancy. I'll give the church $8,000 a month. They love it because look at it.
For nighttime housing.
That's it. They don't even know that the shelter's open. And the community doesn't at all. The unhoused people show up at 8:30. We let them in at 9. Now here's the beauty. The church loves it because they get $8,000. Remember, congregate levels are falling.
Oh, they are.
And the roof still is getting older. And the siding still needs to be painted. And if I have any issues, like let's say a paper towel gets pulled off of the men's room, no big deal. I just replace it. It's easzy and it's dignified. When you come and tour my shelters, when I say my shelters, I partner with everybody. I don't want to say they're my shelters. I provide income for rent. Like at my day shelter, I provide the rent and utilities, but I have an operator that's carrying the labor cost. So it's not difficult. And I have 13 facilities signed up all ready to go. I'm going to need about 26. But Cyrilda, if you have an unhoused person in your neighborhood and they show up at your door right now, you're going to know where to send them.
Yeah.
I ride with police officers all the time and we talk to unsheltered people and I'm like, okay, do you have a resource for them? No, I don't know where to send them. These are our officers. So we have to stop thinking the status quo. Our city council is so entrenched in poor performing operations They failed us. They continue to fail us. And I'm running for mayor because no more status quo. It's time for real change.
I love the passion.
Yeah.
I believe that you can do this.
And someone said that. They said, well, believe or not, did he do the numbers? Does he have the team? Does he have the expertise in implementing a complex problem? And does he have a record of success? And each one of those 4 points I just made are yes, 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 and yes. So we need to trust. But if you don't trust me, then go talk to my team.
Well, I think what people don't naturally trust people who are running for office, right? And when a lot of people run for office, people walk away saying, I don't believe anything that they just said. I don't even believe that they believe what it is that they just said. I think that they just said they're pandering to me right now, and then they're going to get in the office and they're going to do whatever the heck they want to do.
Yeah.
That's how people generally feel about politicians. Yeah. But I'm listening to you right now, and I've worked for many politicians, and I'm like, I think this guy believes he can do this. Like, and that is a separation from most people who are running for office. Most people who are running for office are not necessarily saying, hold me to it. I'm gonna give you a deadline. Gauge me on the deadline. If I don't hit it, I failed. How many politicians do you hear saying those kinds of things?
That's a great point. You know, I tell people I've been fed a steady diet of no my whole life. And had I listened to them, I wouldn't be sitting here with you right now. I mean, going to college and being one of 6 people from Roosevelt High School to go to college and graduate.
Right.
I mean, I've been bucking that trend, but that's everybody. We've all been told no our whole life. It's a matter of whether we choose to listen or not. And I choose to care for people along that way. Here's a funny thing that my wife, the campaign's going great. Mm-hmm. I'm either in first, second, or third. We don't know, but the fundraising's going great because people believe in me. But
I believe what you're saying.
One of my wife's friends called her and said, oh my God, the numbers Keith is doing great. People are really coming to his point. And my wife's friend said, you should start thinking about getting some ball gowns because you might have a mayor's ball. And my wife started laughing at him and she had him on speakerphone. She said, nope, knowing Keith, we're not going to balls. I should go out and buy some steel-toed boots because I'm going to be sweeping up streets. And she's right. Because before we celebrate in Portland, there's no celebration until we end unsheltered homelessness. We've got some cleaning to do. Mm-hmm. And you cannot run your city unless you're doing basic cleaning. We can't have people living on the street suffering. Provide that basic care. Sweep your streets, clean your streets, provide basic maintenance because we're not going to foster people to come back from the nation who've left until we show that our city is beautiful, that it's fully functioning, that we're caring for everybody, that our police are going to show up.
Yes.
When we call them. No more open drug use on the street.
You know what's really interesting about this point you just made, Keith? So I'm born and raised in Michigan. No. No. Invite me, I'll be your +1. Your wife's like, I got my boots on. I'm like, I'll go dance with you, Keith. And I've got some boots too. But what's really interesting to me about this point you just made is, so being born and raised in Michigan and owning property as a result of, family members passing away, et cetera, there are things that the municipal system does in Muskegon and Michigan and West Michigan that doesn't happen here, right? Like we own property, we own rental space, and if your grass grows a micro inch above where I think there's a person walking around with an actual, I'm like, I hate that person. Or if you've got trash around your property, you're getting fined for that, and they're going to ping you every 2 weeks. I come to work here at Workplace Change, 109th and Sandy, and every single morning, whoever's here first, we go and we pick up the trash around the building. I tell them if you see needles, don't pick those up. We've got a protocol for that. But we go to several other businesses, locations to just pick up their trash. Why are businesses not required to? I mean, we're getting taxed to death, but why don't we get a penalty if we don't keep a pristine storefront? Like, why is that something that we just don't care about? I'm always interested in that because it is the face of Portland when people are driving. We're a mile from the airport. If you're coming from the airport and you come up Sandy, you're going to pass these storefronts.
I agree. We're
the gateway of the city. And that should be something that should be codified as well. Yes. Like there's expectations and standards for owning and operating a building and having a storefront in Portland, Oregon.
Yes.
So that's to your point. Like we just clean up these streets.
It's called the community standard.
And
we have those, Cyrilda, but what we've created is a lawless society and a lawful society. And we're holding 2 sets of rules. That's why we cannot have different sets of people. We are all Portlanders.
That's right.
There's no discrimination.
That's right.
For anybody or anything. And so therefore, once we establish those guardrails, You stay between the guardrails. Now all of us go outside of the guardrails, but we need those codes to bring us in and say, here's our community standard.
Absolutely.
We all know where those boundaries are, and we know if we go outside the boundaries, it's not negative. You don't fire people because it's a training opportunity. No, I'm not saying that I'm going to go measure your grass, by the way.
Right, that guy.
But I am saying that
is the
if
worst.
there's garbage outside your curb,
yeah,
that's part of the community standard.
Absolutely.
We have to address that garbage. Graffiti. We can't have graffiti ever, at all. But we've suspended or we've removed all of our police from those very valuable departments. We don't have a traffic division anymore.
Wow.
So imagine our traffic homicides are just through the roof.
Oh.
We don't have detectives for property crime anymore. And so we're at 5%. We are shoulder to shoulder with Oakland and St. Louis now for property crime.
Wow.
I mean, when you think about how far we've fallen
from where we were.
But basic blocking and tackling. Establish those guardrails. Nobody's going to be living on the street because we're providing care for them. Now, if you want to be in Portland and you came here from Tampa or Austin, yeah, we have jobs for people.
Oh, yeah.
But if you want a particular lifestyle, then perhaps it's time to go back to your family in Tampa or Austin. But this is not a safe haven for certain behaviors that are not part of the community standard.
You know, my mother-in-law has this saying. She said, you know, Portland just needs like better parents, right? My mother-in-law has 5 children, and she has a lot of grandchildren. And she was like, no means no. Don't tell me it's no means no. Like, this is just how we operate here. This is just what's in the best interest of our household and for you and your safety. No means no. And so you just talked about guardrails. I remember when they suspended like getting pulled over for speeding. Like, there was like no consequence for speeding during COVID, right? And I'm gonna tell you what happened. Now, number one, I already have a propensity to speed. But what keeps me within the 10 of the speed limit is the consequence associated with it. But when they dropped that consequence, I was like, well, why not? Right? I already have this predisposition to do this behavior to begin with. And then they put those little traffic things back up, and then I dropped my speed back down because I got a ticket, and I was like, no. Here's the point that you're making. If you allow a person to get away with it, they will become the worst version of themselves because there are no community standards associated with it.
That's right.
Right?
Just basic community. And we all need that. Because,
we do.
And you know what? We like that as people.
We do.
We like routine.
And structure.
We like knowing where we stand. And I keep saying we're paying New York City taxes for substandard services. If you're going to make me pay New York City taxes, I need to at least have the environment that is vibrant,
preaching here, preacher,
cosmopolitan, where restaurants, where I can walk out the door with my wife and feel safe as I walk down to my favorite restaurant and get home, instead of walking by tents and feeling bad. My wife called me yesterday. She was driving. She's an early childhood special education teacher. She called me almost in tears yesterday because there was a guy on the corner in clear distress with a sign, "I'm homeless." And I'm thinking, here's what Julie Orlando in Bergen County, she ended homelessness. She says, if I see a sign saying I'm homeless, I need help, she stops. Because she's the director of homeless services. She says, I don't care if my son's in the back seat, who starts crouching down and hiding. She tells the guy, this is your lucky day. I'm in charge of homeless services, and I'm calling transport, I'm calling a police officer, because I have a shelter bed for you. And she says, here's your choice. Okay, you have a sign up telling everybody in my community that I'm not doing my job. She says, I believe this is disaster recovery. Your sign says you're homeless. It's your lucky day. I'm going to provide care for you right now. And the guy has 2 choices. Take the sign down and stop doing it. Or take the transport to the shelter, and she's going to provide care. Now, my wife called me almost in tears yesterday because she saw the suffering. And it's not like the guy just became unsheltered yesterday. It's prolonged 4 or 5 years of unsheltered in Portland. It only gets worse. And that's where we're at in Portland. And I don't want people to think that this is some magic bullet. It's going to be hard next year.
Very hard.
I need all 650,000 of us rowing in the same direction. We got to sweep the streets. We got to care for people. We got to man those shelters. But it's not expensive. But it's going to take months. Behavioral health and addiction is rampant in Portland, more so than most cities in the world. But here's the thing, though. We've been putting so much money into behavioral health and addiction. Now, if we take the pressure off of that system, remember, if we have 5,300 people on the street and we end unsheltered homelessness, we know a third are going to leave. That immediately takes the pressure off of our behavioral health and addiction services, and we can provide better care for those people that are remaining in Portland, right? But we got to stop thinking about exceptionalism. I mean, everywhere I see city council failing. I see our elected officials not doing enough to provide basic nighttime care. We're in this status quo. And my fear is we elect a current city councilor. We passed a camping ban. You got to be kidding me. Tell an encampment to keep it clean within 2 feet. That's a camping ban? And that was part of the rule. If you have an RV, you can be there. It's a primary residence. Oh, but by the way, keep it clean. Well, this is a person in their worst moment of life with the behavioral health. We got to remove the RV. It can't be there.
Yeah.
You can't have that in our neighborhoods, ever. Care for the person.
Keith, I've got 2 more questions for you.
All right.
I've got so many questions. I can go a million different ways on this. Oh my gosh, I want to talk to you about light rail. I want to talk to you about this, people feel like you are incredibly optimistic, like unrealistically optimistic about what is possible. And I want to know, what do you say? Because that is the number one narrative about you. And now that I know that you existed and I'm talking to folks about it, they're like, oh, I love his idea, but it's not realistic. Like, it's not even remotely feasible what this guy is talking about. He's just way too optimistic. He doesn't understand the levers that exist and the functionality of the city and the county. So of course he's coming in cold and coming in hot with all these ideas that are just not reasonable. I want to know what you say to that.
Interesting. The people who are running status quo, they'll say it's ambitious or it can't be done. Do we really want a mayor that says that? Is that really what Portland has fallen to? It's ambitious to want to provide basic nighttime care to 5,300 of my neighbors that are not faceless and nameless. I can tell you a dozen names, people who've slept with me in shelters that are homeless, so I could learn. Is it ambitious to want to...
Wait. People who slept with you in shelters.
When I
so you
test
are
shelters,
sleeping in
absolutely,
the shelter overnight?
Oh, yeah.
On the cot?
How do you learn how to provide basic nighttime shelter at a low cost quickly? Here, let me tell you one story. I'm going to diverge. So I set up a shelter in a parking garage that TriMet let me have, the Gateway parking garage up the street, because ridership on the TriMet system is plummeting.
It is.
It's unsafe, it's unsanitary, and it's unreliable. So I asked the leaders, I'm going to borrow one of your parking garages, because one of my leadership council members has a parking garage shelter in Brisbane, Australia. I set it up, it worked. We tried it on the coldest day of the year, it failed. You got to fail. Well, it worked in Brisbane, Australia, because it's constantly 75 degrees.
Right.
So it failed here. You got to fail. And so I opened it up in a church, and I had this beautiful blow-up mattress, 1.5 feet tall, and I had homeless people come in with me, and I wanted to know. And they said, Keith, this is going to be a terrible night's sleep. I said, no, I got you this beautiful blow-up mattress. And he said, Keith, I'm used to sleeping on the ground. I don't want a blow-up mattress. You're not going to learn that unless you go and experience it and understand it yourself. You have to talk to your customers. I've learned that in business. Talk to your residents. Talk to your customers. What do they need? Don't make a policy until you talk to the user before you do anything. Now
You might be the only person running for office who went and slept in homeless shelters.
Absolutely. I mean, I have a day
How many
shelter.
times did you
I have
do
a day
that?
shelter open right this minute, providing care for citizens and connection to behavioral health and addiction. Doesn't, or I worked at them at night. I'll work at them at night too.
Wow.
Because that's how you have to. We're in a humanitarian crisis. We've normalized this. We have to know exactly what we need to do quickly. I know I'm 80% right, but I know I'm 20% wrong. But I'm smart enough to know when I fail, I'm not going to fail long. I'm going to fail fast. Improve it and try again. Now, going back to your question, why is it ambitious to want to care for 5,000 people that are on our street that is affecting livability throughout my city? Why is it ambitious to want to hold the hundreds of millions of dollars that we're spending or wasting without results? Why is it ambitious for somebody to come in with a clearly delineated plan to implement it quickly? Think of this as an earthquake. We need to stop thinking about this as poor people on the side of the street that are wasted away when it's affecting every housed person in Portland. The status quo has got to go. We cannot continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. That's not ambitious. It's not idealistic. It's being used in every city in the United States except for a few cities on the West Coast. And I'm simply saying enough is enough. And as mayor, that's where you need. Now, can I do this? Absolutely. Do I work well with others? Absolutely. Do I already know Chair Vega Peterson? Do I know President Peterson? Do I know all of the people I'm going to have to work with? Well, yes. But are they squirming because I'm talking about big and real change? Yes. But we're all going to enjoy the fruits of Portland when we succeed together.
I love it.
Yeah.
Light rail. What's your vision for light rail?
High-speed rail.
High-speed rail. That's right. That's right.
So I've been working.
Where are you taking us?
So I used to live in
Alaska?
Europe. No. So I used to live in Europe. I used to live in London, travel through Europe, and I was amazed at high-speed rail. I'd get on it, and I'd be wherever I wanted to go in an hour at half the cost and half the time of driving. Well, Cascadia is this mega region. We grew 30 million people in the last 20 years. We're going to grow 30 million more in the next 20. And if you try and drive from Portland to Seattle, Seattle's my largest service center. Takes me 3 to 4 hours to go there.
For sure. Especially if you go and you hit 8 o'clock traffic or 3 p.m. traffic, it's tough.
Here's the brilliance. High-speed rail, when it's fully operational from Portland to Seattle, is going to reduce 80% of inner-city trips. Because you're not going to be in a car for 3 or 4 hours. It takes 1 hour to go to Seattle, and it's half the cost. It transforms our entire mega region. It becomes our new main street.
For sure.
We're in Seattle in an hour. We're in Vancouver, BC in an hour. And it's just those 3 cities.
Okay.
There'll be a stop in between, and then you connect it with inner city trains or local transit. It transforms your economy. It allows capital and people and innovation and ideas to travel quickly.
For sure.
The mega region is Portland, Seattle, and Vancouver. It connects us together because we cannot grow just our urban core here, and we can't do it while living in cars.
How are we going to afford that?
It's $40 billion, but here's the beauty. If you added 1 lane between Portland and Seattle on both, north and south, it's $108 billion to build 1 lane. And here's the drill. As soon as you open that extra lane, you're still only going 55 miles an hour.
Facts.
And then soon thereafter, because of traffic coming and using it, it's already congested. High-speed rail, you can just add more train sets, and it always goes 250 miles an hour. We can grow our economy without wasting time in a car. You can have a beer at 6 o'clock while you're going to the Mariners game. You can have a cup of coffee at 7 a.m. when you're going for lunch in Seattle and you're coming back at 1 o'clock. It transforms everything that we're doing. We have got to stop thinking about a car-centric society. In fact, half of the people in Portland don't even own a car. Secretary Buttigieg said something at his confirmation hearing for the Department of Transportation. He says, I envision a nation where you don't have to own a car to prosper. Isn't that what we want to be? Now, that's 20 years away, Cyrilda. Portland used to dream big. And I've got a bill in the Oregon legislature, House Bill 2691 last year that I ran. There's federal matching dollars of 9 to 1. It's free money. Let's go get it. It's for planning. It's a 20-year ramp up. It's not going to happen in 20 months, but it's not going to happen at all if we don't start.
That's right.
So as mayor, I'm going to be that inspiration on it. But I'm smart enough to know I need to block and tackle, care for our community today, stop failing our city and citizens. And with the political capital that I gain, we start thinking about doing big things well. Portland was the first to really grow light rail. We had the most advanced urban core in the nation.
Yeah.
We've ceded that to other cities. Let's get it back.
We have.
Yeah. And you know who's standing in our way? Us.
Huh.
Let's stop thinking about the status quo. Let's get out of our own way, start rethinking how we care for our community. Let's stop voting the same way. Let's stop thinking the same way. Let's stop thinking about exceptionalism and start copying best practices from others. And let's take that lead again. I do believe we can be the most livable city in America again. We once were. Why not again?
Well, this has been an exhilarating conversation. I only have one final question for you. And that is, why should the people vote for you in comparison to everyone else that's in the field?
Okay. So I use the word Portland Renaissance. We need to start dreaming. And by dreaming, we got to do the hard things now. It's not going to be easy. We have to start focusing on the change that we want to see in Portland. We can end unsheltered homelessness. We can revitalize our communities and our businesses. And best of all, we have the money, the time, the people already there that we're committed. So I'm saying I'm asking for everybody's support. I'm asking for people to vote for me. If you have the ability to make a donation, make a donation. But it's time to really start thinking about the Portland we want to be. It's time to repair, restore, and revitalize our community together.
Right on.
Right on.
Keith, thank you so much for joining us for Word on the
Cyrilda.
Street. Well, that's this issue of Word on the Street Election Edition. You heard a little bit from Keith Wilson. And if you've got more questions for him, I can assure you he and his team will be incredibly responsive. Arguably the top responsive person that we've spoken to for all of the Word on the Street Election Edition invitations. And it's been a joy to speak with Keith today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Sorelli. Yeah, pleasure.
Okay. Until next time.